I have spent years studying the patterns behind people who genuinely make it. And I mean really make it, not just talk about it, versus people who try and never quite break through. And the difference is not what you think. It is not talent. It is not luck. It is not even effort, although effort matters. The real difference comes down to this. What kind of evidence are you making your decisions from? Most people make decisions based on materialized possibility. What does that mean in practice? You look at your bank account, see a number that feels small, and you say, I can't. You look at your relationships and you say, I'm alone. This is exhausting. You look at your body and feel insecure. You look at your life and you see lack, problems, evidence of everything that has not worked. And from that place, from what is already visible, already proven, already materialized, you make your next decision. Successful people do something fundamentally different. They make decisions based on possibilities that have not yet materialized. They are not acting from contraction. They are acting from assumption, from expansion, from a kind of faith that does not need proof first. I want to bring this directly into the financial world because this is where I have seen this principle play out with almost mathematical consistency. Early in my own journey, I had to make a decision that, if I had looked purely at the numbers in front of me, made absolutely no logical sense. I did not have the kind of income that would comfortably support the commitment I was about to make. If I had stayed purely in the realm of materialized possibility, what my bank account currently showed, what my client list currently looked like, I would have talked myself out of it completely. I would have stayed smaller, safer, more reasonable. But I did not decide from that place. I decided from the possibility that had not yet shown up anywhere except inside me. And here is what I think most people get wrong about this kind of decision. It looks, from the outside, like risk, like recklessness. People who reach the level of success they are working toward often get labeled as people who simply took bigger risks than everyone else. But that is not quite accurate. What they are actually doing is refusing to let the five senses, what they can currently see, touch, and verify, be the final word on what is possible. This connects directly to something Neville Goddard taught with remarkable clarity, that if you want to create a different reality, you have to live from the end, not as someone walking toward a destination, still in the process of getting there. As someone for whom it has, in a very real sense, already happened. I know how strange that can sound the first time you hear it. Live from the end. My bank account does not reflect the end. My current circumstances do not look anything like the outcome I am working toward. How am I supposed to live from something that has not happened yet? That tension, that exact question, is what we are going to dig into for the rest of this conversation. Because by the end of this video, I am going to walk you through the specific internal shift that allowed me to make that financial decision without a single piece of external proof that it would work out. Not theory. The actual mechanism I used, and the practice that came out of it. But first, I want to make sure you genuinely understand what living from the end means, because most people who hear that phrase get it slightly wrong, and that small misunderstanding is exactly what keeps so many people stuck, doing the inner work, and still not seeing their financial reality change. If you are new here, hit subscribe, and grab the free PDF on angel numbers linked in the description. Let's go deeper. So let's talk about what it actually means to live from the end, because this is the piece that, when properly understood, separates people who genuinely create new realities from people who spend years doing affirmations and visualizations without much changing. Most people approach a desire as something distant, something out there, separate from them, that they are walking toward. You want financial freedom, so you picture it somewhere ahead of you, a destination you have not yet arrived at. And that framing, however innocent it seems, keeps the desire permanently at arm's length. Because as long as something is ahead of you, it remains, by definition, not yours yet. Living from the end means something completely different. It means holding the internal state, the feelings, the identity, the quiet certainty of someone for whom this has already happened, not someone hoping it will happen, not someone working hard so that it might happen someday, someone who is already, internally, standing on the other side of it. This collapses something important. The sense of separation, of time, of distance that keeps most manifestation work moving so slowly. When you are walking towards something, you are implicitly agreeing that it is far away, that it takes time, that there is a gap between you and it. When you live from the end, that gap closes, not in the external world necessarily, not yet, but in the only place where the entire process actually begins, inside you. Let me bring this back to that financial decision I mentioned. If I had approached it from the typical walking toward it mindset, I would have spent that period anxious, checking constantly whether clients were coming in, whether the numbers were moving in the right direction, whether the decision had been the right one. That is the normal human instinct. Gather evidence, confirm the decision was sound, reduce the uncertainty. But here is exactly where most people sabotage themselves without ever realizing it, and it is so common that I want you to really sit with this. The moment you start anxiously checking external reality for proof that something is changing, checking the bank account every hour, scanning for signs that things are working, you flood your own subconscious with the opposite of what you are trying to create. Doubt. Fear, the felt sense of lack, and that flooding does not just fail to help. It actively resets the very state you were trying to build and sustain. This is the difference between desire and identity, and it is one of the most practically important distinctions I can offer you. When you want something, you are placing it outside of yourself as something separate, something you do not yet have. When you embody the identity of someone who already has it, when your sense of who you are has already shifted, regardless of what the external numbers currently show, you stop broadcasting absence and start broadcasting alignment. I worked with a client once who was deep in this exact checking pattern. She was trying to grow her business, had made some genuinely smart strategic decisions, and yet she would check her revenue dashboard multiple times a day. Every dip sent her into a spiral of doubt. Every plateau felt like confirmation that maybe this was not going to work. We did not change her strategy. We changed the checking pattern. She committed to making her decisions and then deliberately stepping back from constant verification, choosing instead to hold the identity of someone whose business was already thriving, even on the days the dashboard did not yet reflect it. Within a relatively short window, something shifted that had nothing to do with a new tactic and everything to do with what she stopped feeding her subconscious every single day. This is the real mechanism behind living from the end. It is not pretending the current numbers do not exist. It is refusing to let those numbers be the only voice allowed to define what you are choosing to be in this moment. And there is a very specific reason why constantly seeking proof is so damaging to this process. A reason that explains why so many people unintentionally sabotage their own progress without ever realizing they are doing it. That is exactly what we are going to unpack next. So why exactly does constantly checking for proof undermine the entire process? I want to break this down clearly because once you understand the actual mechanism, you will recognize this pattern everywhere in your own financial life and in the people around you. Your subconscious does not respond to your words. It responds to your dominant state of being, whatever you are repeating most frequently, whatever feeling you return to over and over throughout your day. Frequency, in this context, is not some mystical vibration floating in the air. It is simply a measure of repetition. Who are you being, most consistently, hour after hour? That repeated state is what actually gets registered and reflected back into your reality. So here is what happens when you decide, with genuine conviction, to embody a new financial identity, and then, 20 minutes later, anxiously check your bank account to see if anything has changed yet. In that single moment of checking, you are not neutral. You are not simply gathering information. You are reactivating the old state, the worry, the need for external confirmation. The subtle but very real message to your own subconscious that says, I do not actually trust this yet. I need the physical world to prove it to me before I will believe it. And because your subconscious responds to repetition and dominant state, not to the one declaration you made that morning, that anxious checking moment can outweigh the decision itself if it happens often enough throughout the day. You end up, without realizing it, spending far more time in the old frequency of doubt than in the new frequency of the identity you are trying to build. This is exactly the trap I see most often in financial transformation. Someone makes a powerful, genuine decision to shift their relationship with money. And then they spend the rest of the day unconsciously undoing it, checking the account obsessively, scanning for signs of failure, mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios just to be prepared. Each of those moments is a small re-immersion into lack. And lack, repeated often enough, becomes the dominant signal, regardless of the one strong decision made earlier that day. Are you following the reasoning so far? If something here is not fully clicking, or if you have a specific situation you are trying to apply this to, drop it in the comments below. Your question might genuinely become the topic of our next video. I want to give you a different example than the one I shared earlier because I think it illustrates this from another angle. I knew someone navigating a significant career transition who had decided, with real clarity, to leave a stable but deeply unfulfilling position to build something of her own. She made the decision from a place of genuine internal alignment. She could feel, viscerally, what the new chapter of her life was going to look and feel like. But for months afterward, she kept reaching out to former colleagues, checking how the old position was doing, almost as if she needed reassurance that leaving had been the right call, or perhaps secretly hoping to find evidence that staying would have been smarter. Every one of those check-ins, however well-intentioned, pulled her back into the old identity. It reopened a door she had already decided to close. The shift happened only once she stopped looking backward for confirmation and instead fully inhabited the decision she had already made, treating the new identity, the new chapter, as the only reality worth feeding her attention. This is the real cost of constantly seeking proof. It is not just an inefficient habit. It is an active, repeated re-immersion into the very state you are trying to leave behind. And once you see that clearly, the practical question becomes obvious. How do you actually sustain a new decision, a new identity, without falling into this checking trap? That is exactly where we are headed next. So, how do you actually sustain a decision long enough for it to take root, without falling into the checking trap we just talked about? This is the part that turns everything we have covered into something you can genuinely apply, starting today. The first thing to understand is that deciding before the evidence appears is not the same as deciding recklessly. It is not ignoring practical reality or pretending circumstances do not exist. It is choosing, deliberately, which voice gets to define what is possible for you, the voice of what is currently visible, or the voice of what you genuinely sense is true beneath the surface. In practical terms, this looks like closing a door before you can see exactly what is on the other side of it. I think of it almost like stepping out of a relationship that has clearly run its course. You cannot fully open the door to something healthier while you are still keeping one foot in the old situation, still checking if it might somehow work out after all. The same principle applies to your relationship with money, with scarcity, with whatever financial ceiling you have been living under. You cannot fully invite in a new financial identity while part of you is still checking back on the old one for reassurance. This means making the decision and then deliberately not negotiating with it every single hour. Not because doubt will never show up. It will because we are human, but because you are no longer giving doubt the steering wheel every time it speaks up. Here is the practice I actually use, and the one I promised you at the beginning of this video. When I make a significant decision, financial or otherwise, I do something very specific in the hours and days that follow. I deliberately limit how often I allow myself to check for external confirmation, not denial, not pretending the practical world does not exist. Simply a conscious boundary around how much attention I give to seeking proof. Instead, several times throughout the day, I pause, sometimes for only a few seconds, and I ask myself one question. Who am I being right now? Am I being the version of myself still rooted in the old evidence, the old number, the old fear? Or am I being the version of myself who has already stepped into the decision I made? That question alone, repeated consistently throughout the day, does something checking never can. It keeps redirecting your dominant state back toward the identity you are actually trying to build, rather than the one your circumstances are still echoing from the past. There is also something important to understand about the gap between deciding and seeing results, what I think of as the law of gestation. There is always a period between planting a seed and harvesting the fruit. Nobody digs up a seed every few days to check if it is growing. That would destroy it before it had a chance. Yet this is exactly what most of us do with our financial decisions, our identity shifts, our deepest desires. We plant something powerful and then dig it up constantly through anxious checking, never giving it the undisturbed time it actually needs to take root. Patience, in this context, is not passive waiting. It is the active discipline of continuing to embody the new identity while the external world has not yet caught up, without needing it to catch up first in order to keep believing. I think back often to that financial decision I made years ago, the one I mentioned at the start of this video. I did not have proof it would work. I had a felt sense, an internal certainty that did not come from logic alone, and a willingness to keep showing up as the version of myself who had already succeeded long before the numbers agreed with me. The proof came later. It always does. But it never comes first. If you take one thing from this entire conversation, let it be this. Stop waiting for your bank account, your relationships, or your circumstances to hand you permission to believe something different is possible. Decide first. Become the identity first. Let the evidence catch up, because it always does on its own timeline once you stop demanding it arrive before you are willing to believe. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this video. It truly means the world to me, and I hope this conversation brought you something real, something you can carry with you starting today. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel. We have so much more to explore together. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. You never know whose life you might change with a single video. The books that have shaped my journey and that I personally recommend are all linked in the description below. Go check them out. They are worth every page. And don't forget, there is a free PDF in the description on how to interpret angel numbers and equal hours. Grab yours. It is completely free, and it might just change the way you see the signs the universe has been sending you all along. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.